Greetings, family, greetings. So I wanted to come to you on YouTube today, and I wanted to further the conversation about being a living foodist and a raw vegan for, some time now. I shared that with ones and ones because I feel like most people can relate who are on the journey to becoming these things, these classifications, right? Which man makes these classifications? But by definition, of what the world defines a living foodist or a raw vegan, not heating foods over 117 degrees for more than 3 minutes, not cooking anything on a stove, eating foods that contain their raw source. And there are levels to that. Many people who start on this journey, they eat a lot of dry foods. And, I thought it was important to come to you and expound a little bit on my journey into this lifestyle and also maintaining this lifestyle. For me, living foodist, which I utilize that classification so that I can connect with ones and ones out there who that may be all that they know, and many of us are on different levels of learning how to consume food that is not going to be damaging or harming to our systems. But being a living foodist to me really is about sensitivity. It's really levels of sensitivity, levels of connection that you have with the Almighty from within. So levels of connection that you have with yourself and levels of connection that you have with the source that has provided you yourself, right? Like that has inspired yourself to even be awake and to be breathing. So the classification, I feel like it's limiting to the overstanding of what this lifestyle for me is truly about. It's been a journey into waking up a dead state mentality, waking up a dormant state of exit and stance. Exiting the stance of a dormant state is really what being a living foodist is about, or not eating cooked foods is about. And it's a journey. It's not this straight and narrow path. And I think that it really represents life as not being a straight and narrow path, because we all come here to express the Almighty's vision, you understand? And all of us have our own individual expressions of that to enact and to fulfill in this lifetime. What I have noticed in this process is I have detoxed from the time I started eating foods that were not cooked, when I made the decision that this would be the lifestyle that I wanted to pursue. And also when I was called to pursue this lifestyle, because of the level of toxicity that I carried within myself, I was really incapable of living my life to the fullest in that state, right? Now, other people come with different strengths. I know people who have very strong immune systems. I know people who have very strong digestive systems, and they don't experience the level of dysbiosis and disposition that I experience eating depleted foods. There are some commonalities that come with eating depleted foods. There is a difference between eating foods that have their full vitality and have their full hydration to eating foods that are dry and not live. Like there is a different energy, because it's a different consumption. We are what we consume. In the video, I had expressed that there have been times that I did eat cooked food. It's not so much a matter of judging myself like I have to live to this standard that other people set or that I even try to set on myself based off of the definitions that other people define what vitality is. It's more of, if I eat cooked food, then I know that I'm not operating in the level of sensitivity that brings me full clarity, which brings me really a lot of joy, right? And we're coming out of that mindset. Like, we're coming out of that body set. We're coming out of that cellular memory, coming out of that generational memory right now as a people, as a human race. That's why it's, you know, you see more and more people gravitating towards eating foods that have not been cooked, but it's not the final step. Even juice fasting and detoxing, all these classifications that people put on these things, and then they look at other people and they say, oh, well, you're not doing this and you're not doing that. They're all steps to becoming more sensitive and in connection to your higher source, to your sensitive source, to your godly source, right? And it's the time that is being required for that. Like right now, it's the time for that, because we're coming into a new paradigm. We're already in a paradigm shift, and old paradigms are being dismantled and eliminated. And part of that old paradigm of being dismantled and eliminated is feeling sick, feeling ill, because when we feel sick and we feel ill and we feel numb, we are disconnected from our source. And a lot of us are not fulfilling our purposes on this planet because we're disconnected, right? I wanted to also speak more about the process of detoxing through living foods, because a lot of people think, oh, okay, if I just eat raw foods, then I've arrived, you know? If I just do a juice fast, then I've arrived. If I fast for whatever amount of time, whether it's 90 days or 100 days, oh, I've arrived. You never arrive anywhere. It's really about, again, becoming sensitive and sensitive and sensitive. But in that process, it's not just the physical that counts. It's the mental, the emotional, the psycho-spiritual collection of waste that runs very deep. So a lot of times when people start this journey, some people find it difficult to stay the path because they haven't detoxed physically, which initiates an emotional detox, which initiates a mental detox. And to be honest with you, this is where a lot of people have a lot of blockages and stop consuming living foods, or stop consuming foods that haven't been adulterated to a certain extent, right? Because the detox that's occurring on deeper levels, it gets deep. Everything you eat is tied to an emotional, mental, psychological, astral memory blueprint. And sometimes that blueprint isn't even yours. Like, you come with that blueprint, right? So I have found times, like I have found on my journey, in times where I did consume cooked foods, that it was part of my detoxification process. And I learned how to be honest with myself, to observe fully what was coming forward and what was being expressed, and within my body and within the desire to eat certain things, and even the manifestation of eating certain things. For example, this past Mother's Day passed, right? I think, the past Mother's Day passed. And I have a lot of issues around Mother's Day because my mother, I didn't grow with my mother. I never knew my mother. You know, there's abandonment issues that I'm still healing from. There's trauma there on the emotional, mental, psychospiritual, astral level that exists deep within the cellular structure. And I remember I wasn't necessarily at the level of sensitivity to be fully aware that I was feeling lonely, or that I was feeling sad, that, of the circumstances, because it's a deep memory. It's not a surface memory, right? It's not a surface emotion. It's not a reaction to something that happened right in front of me. It's something that rests very deep within my structure. And on that day, my mate and I, we were traveling, my king man and I, we were traveling. and we were under a level of stress. We were under a level of stress and distress with the various changes of COVID-19 hitting. And of course that could be perceived, your mind controls everything, but that's how we felt at the time. And it was Mother's Day coming up. And I was like, you know, I'm feeling for a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Like, why am I feeling for this peanut butter and jelly sandwich, you know? And the desire to have it was so deep, so deeply rooted. I went ahead and I had the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I went and I sought it out, I ate it, and then the purge began. So the real purge began, and now this is after so many years of being a living foodist. Now we have to understand too that anytime we eat anything, it's a memory, it's a cellular memory. So with us having the restaurant, I was creating cooked foods, and that's a consumption in itself. Anytime that comes from you, you're consuming it. Whether you're eating it or not, you're consuming it because you're making it, right? So feeling that I was limited in what my options were at the time in creating financial stability in Belize, because most people are not raw, they're not living foodists, you know. The ideal of not consuming flesh is a new idea here. And while the whole world, it's been so many years that most people have been aware of the damaging, harmful effects of consuming animal products. And that's just part of the way that the system sets it, because they don't want the people to really know the truth. So they keep them locked down in a certain mentality, especially through consumption. So feeling limited, which is from inside as well, I began to cook food, which was a consumption, so it's only natural that I would consume some of it, right? But that holds a memory. So it can create a cycle in which you want more cooked food, and you want more cooked food, and you want more cooked food. That's why sometimes when people are eating foods that haven't been cooked, and then they start having a little bit here and there and having a little bit here and there, and eventually they just stop eating raw food and start going back to eating cooked food. And part of this is because they don't detox during that period as well, or in between those periods. But every food that you eat is connected to a memory beyond that on all the other bodies. So it's also important to detox that memory. And sometimes that memory that rests on the other levels will initiate, like when you're purging, will initiate another level of purging. So that's what I found. I found that during the time that, you know, it was Mother's Day and all of these things, and I had eaten the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Now, I enjoyed the peanut butter and jelly sandwich to the fullest. Don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted. But one could say that that also related to that level of toxic state that needed and desired to be appeased at that time, right? On an emotional level, wanting to feel comforted, which is tied to feeling abandoned, which is tied to the toxic experience that I experienced as a child and not having my mother around, right? So it's all related. So even though I enjoyed it to the full extent, because I've been really, like I said, I would say at least 95, 98% all live for some time now, my body completely rejected it because my body is not used to those things anymore. And you know, sometimes even the level of toxicity, which are parasites, can trick us and say, oh, that's not going to bother you. Oh, don't worry, you know. And you have it, and your body begins to purge immediately. And sometimes people will, you know, go with the purging process and allow now what has been put in to come out now on a fullness. And sometimes people will just continue to stuff down and stuff down and stuff down. For me, eating the peanut butter and jelly sandwich, what it did is it initiated a deep, deep purging, after which I went on a water fast. And the emotional waste that came forward, the heart-centered waste that came forward was pretty astounding to me. And if you ask me now, even the memories, like the nostalgic memories of different foods, is part of that toxic relating, you know, from within. Because really what I have found is that you don't require any foods, even raw food. Like, you don't require any foods. When you're desiring dry foods, maybe, you know, kale chips, or even, you know, foods that don't contain liquid, usually it's tied to a detrimental toxic level on another body, and all foods are tied to that. So while you're detoxing, you may experience, and even while you're on this journey to become more sensitive, you may experience having moments where you eat or consume, you know, foods that are not in the high vibration or the highest vibration. And really being a living foodist is, again, about sensitivity. You can go, this thing has levels, you know, like literally you could be eating all non-cooked food, but then you are having sexual relations with people who are consuming damaging foods or cooked foods. You're consuming cooked foods when you do that. So, you know what I mean? Like, there isn't no ideal. We're all in the same boat. We're all moving in the same movement forward to become more sensitive as a human race. And I find that a lot of people who are on this journey, they get really egotistical about where they exist as this and as that. And it's really, they are the same expression of the same energy that is traversing the universe, and that's throughout the whole planet. So I am no different than a person who eats meat. I just happen to be at a different place in the alignment. You understand what I'm saying? And my particular job is to be that expression that the Almighty has asked for me to be, so that ones and ones can know that they can be more sensitive and that they don't have to suffer, right? But there are levels to being a living foodist. There are levels to being in your raw vitality or your living vitality, which is really just you and the Most High. You know, unfortunately, our environment is not clean, so sometimes, like, you know, even that consumption is not at its height. We're all not in the ideal state. None of us are in an ideal state. Even the meat eaters to the raw vegans to the people who are liquiditarians, like, none of us are in an ideal state. And also, you may experience that, like me being on this journey for 10 years, I mean, at 10 years, I never thought I would ever eat anything that had been cooked. You know, like, I was like, I don't, you know, I never thought I would even want it. But we have to understand everything is a consumption. So if you're around people who are very toxic, then you're consuming those people. If you're around confusion, you're consuming confusion. And sometimes in order to balance itself out, the body says, hey, like, let's numb down a little bit because you won't survive in that setting. You understand? So really being live and really being in your true vitality requires entire being change. That takes time. It's not something that happens overnight, and it's not something that anybody else can define for you. I can't define that for you. Only you can define that for you. Me coming into my level of sensitivity may be different than the next person coming into their level of sensitivity. There is no straight and narrow path to being raw, or to being vegan, or to being live foodist. Those classifications, I feel like, have been provided to provide some kind of blueprint and guideline for ones and ones to follow, so that they can reach levels of sensitivity. I mean, there was a time when all of the books that I studied, there was a time where no one even ate, you know, and we didn't breathe through our nose, we breathed through our pineal gland. You understand? So we have really degenerated as a species and as a people, and eating in itself, from what I study and what I've experienced doing water fasts, is and doing dry fasting as well is a form of degeneration. Whether you're eating so-called raw foods, whether you're eating cooked foods, whether you're eating flesh, these are just all levels of depletion, right? So I feel like that's important to recognize, because I feel like so many people look outside of themselves to other people and say, oh, that person is so clean, I want to be like them. But you don't know what that person goes through behind. You don't know the journey behind eating, you know, living foods, right? Or the journey behind being a so-called raw foodist, or even the ups and downs. You don't know that, because really it's just about being sensitive enough to do your purpose and connect to the Most High and be part of the one energy. The one energy. There's only one energy. There's only one frequency. We are no different than anybody else on this planet. We're no different than the birds. We're not separated from the trees. We're not separated from the earth. We're not separated from the flesh eaters. We're not separated. We're not separated. So it really goes really deep. And detoxing is, you know, living, eating, and consuming foods that have not been cooked by a stove or heated up is just step number 2 in the process. The first step would probably be to stop eating the flesh. The next step would be to stop eating, you know, dense foods, cooked foods. And then the next step would stop eating foods that don't contain water. You know, then the next step would be stop eating in general. Stop eating, period. You know, then going to juices. Then the next step would be just drinking water. Then the next step would be just living off of air. You understand what I'm saying? So there are levels to this thing. So we can't sit back and judge other people about their journey and be police with other people about their journey. We have to just live in full authenticity with ourselves. I share with you because I feel like, you know, a lot of times people beat up on themselves too and be like, oh, I this and I fell off and I this and I that. It's just a matter of sensitivity, and we're all decluttering so that we could become more sensitive, so that we could be in more connection, so that we can be more fulfilled, so that we could be happier, so that we can really live in full vitality of being connected to that source at all times, which we have been disconnected from as a human race, because of all of the different things that we've experienced, from our generation to the previous generation, to the generation before that, to the generation before that, to the generation. We're talking about thousands of years, right? This is a progression, and now we're coming into a new cycle where we're regenerating into the level of sensitivity that we're supposed to be. That's why, you know, when you go into the Maya calendar, there are different, this is not new. This is not a new thing that's occurring. Eating raw foods or living foods is not new. This is not new. It's just new to us because we're coming out of a certain paradigm, right? So one, don't judge yourself, and know that as long as your goal is to stay sensitive and stay in tune, and you are willing to do the work to detox, even if that sometimes means that you participate in eating things that are not as hydrating, know that that's part of the detox process. That's part of the detoxification process, right? Because sometimes that detox is so intense that it requires you to step back to move forward. And we're all here together. So it's not about us versus the next person who's so-called toxic, because they're really just a mirror of the same energy that flows through us. It's all the same frequency. It's all the same energy. And we look to learn from those experiences, and we look to reflect back to ones and ones, to each other, so that we can manifest a total wholeness of a beautiful visual of the Almighty that we're meant to express on this planet, right? So don't be hard on yourself. If you have a little cooked food on your journey, it's not the end of the world. Just know it is part of the detox process. And in the course that we're having, the Pure Vision Summer Solstice Detoxification Purification Program, we're going to speak more about the emotional, mental, astral connection to, you know, to this detoxification process, and also to the foods that you consume and you desire, and to food addictions and how deep food addictions run. Yeah, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised how deep this stuff runs, right? And so we give thanks, and I encourage you all to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you have not already. Follow us on Facebook or Instagram. Also, subscribe to the website. We're giving you a free, beautiful Superfood, Super Milks, Super Shakes ebook that is really just informative, and it will help you in your journey and help you to remain hydrated and optimal, right? And then also definitely check out our website for the upcoming 2020 Pure Vision Summer Solstice Detoxification Program, because it's going to be awesome. I'm really, really excited to share with you my experiences and my journey, which hasn't always been straight and narrow, yet I still continue to live out my purpose and my vision of what the Most High wants me to, and I'm much happy doing it. And I'm happy and glad to share with you, you know, the different phases of what I've been through on this journey. So anyways, I'm Chef India Camiel signing off. Definitely take a look at the links in the description below, and we will chat soon.